Imagine Christmas Eve. A night meant for warmth, family, and joy. But for me, it was a stage for humiliation. My own mother, my relatives, their eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction as they banished me to the freezing porch, forcing me to eat my dinner on a flimsy paper plate, isolated and ridiculed. They thought I was a failure, a stain on their perfect lives. What they couldn't see, what they never suspected, was that tucked into the pocket of my threadbare sweater, I held a secret. A $120 million secret. And that secret was about to shatter their entire world. My name is Laya Cole. I'm 38, and the events of that particular Christmas Eve are etched into my memory with an icy precision. Outside, the cold air felt like a physical presence, sharp and intrusive, almost observing how much indignity one person could truly bear. Frost clung to the wrought iron railing, delicate yet merciless, as if painted there. The harsh December wind sliced through the thin fabric of my sweater, numbing my fingers until holding the flimsy paper plate, balanced precariously on a wobbly folding table, became a monumental effort. A small, struggling space heater wheezed beside me, its orange coil emitting a faint, apologetic glow, too weak to offer any real comfort. My breath escaped invisible puffs, ghost-like against the frigid air, and the beef Wellington on my plate, once a decadent dish, solidified into an unappetizing, unrecognizable mass. My knees trembled uncontrollably against the unforgiving concrete floor. Just behind the glistening glass doors, mere feet away, a world of warmth bloomed, a world from which I felt utterly exiled. The grand dining room shone under the opulent chandelier's golden glow. Laughter, light and carefree, echoed through the space, bouncing off the impeccably polished marble floors. Champagne bubbled effervescently in tall, elegant crystal flutes. Velvet gowns shimmered softly, reflecting the festive lights. My relatives, their faces alight with an air of inherent privilege, leaned in conspiratorially, discussing their latest vacation homes and burgeoning investment portfolios, all while meticulously ignoring the member of their own family they had just cast out to the elements. The contrast wasn't subtle, it was a deliberate, brutal statement. They were comfortably warm while I was rapidly freezing. They reveled in lavish abundance while I clutched a paper plate and a plastic fork. They were a family unit, or so they claimed. I was merely a constant, inconvenient reminder of everything they sought to avoid: failure, imperfection, and the bitter consequences of their own profound cruelty. Yet none of them suspected that the woman shivering on the porch, wrapped in a sweater they openly scorned, held the one thing capable of unraveling every carefully constructed lie they had ever told themselves about their status, their wealth, and their supposed superiority. But this deeply personal story, this dramatic turning point, did not begin in the biting cold of that Christmas Eve porch. It commenced a full 5 years earlier, during a time when the world, and indeed my family, still believed I was on an unstoppable trajectory toward monumental success. Back then, when I was introduced, it was with a tone of profound respect and genuine admiration. "This is Laya Cole," they would proudly declare, CEO of Brightcore Systems. I had painstakingly built that company from the ground up, a labor of love creating innovative software for small businesses. Reliable, practical tools born from an unyielding passion and an obsessive dedication to problem solving. I wasn't yet wealthy in the way my family defined it, but I was fiercely proud, filled with an unwavering sense of accomplishment. I poured every last cent of my personal savings, my entire retirement account, and even the precious equity from my modest condo into that burgeoning dream. It was more than a business. It was my identity, my future. And then, without warning, one colossal client defaulted on a $500,000 contract. It was a single, devastating blow, an unforeseen collapse, and everything I had meticulously constructed crumbled so rapidly it felt as if the very ground had been pulled out from under my feet. The world tilted on its axis. I signed the bankruptcy papers in a courthouse that reeked faintly of old dust and stale coffee, a scent that now forever triggers a memory of profound loss. I remember staring at my own reflection in the cold glass of the door, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman gazing back. There were no tears, no screams of protest. I simply went quiet, as if an internal switch had been abruptly flipped, silencing every emotion. 2 weeks later, with options exhausted and hope dwindling, I accepted the only job I could secure, a night janitor at Parkview Tower, the very same glittering Manhattan skyscraper where Brightcore Systems had once proudly occupied a prestigious office suite. From the celebrated CEO to a humble member of the cleaning staff, all within the same imposing structure. A twisted, ironic poetry I had never sought, nor deserved. Every night, from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning, I pushed a heavy gray cleaning cart past Suite 21105, the precise location where my old life, my vibrant dream, had once thrived. Now, it housed a new generation of young executives, their expensive watches glinting, their egos even louder than their laughter. They would carelessly toss their empty coffee cups and discarded files into the very trash bins I was tasked with emptying. None of them ever bothered to look up to truly see me. To them, I wasn't a person with a history, a name, or a shattered dream. I was merely background noise, an anonymous presence with a name tag, a ghost haunting the corridors of my own past ambition. My mother, Vivian Cole, a woman whose every word felt like a judgment, never once missed an opportunity to underscore my dramatic fall from grace. "You had absolutely everything, Laya," she would loudly announce at every family gathering, her voice designed to carry across the room, "and you squandered it all trying to play the entrepreneur." Brandon would never bring such embarrassment upon us. Her golden child, my brother Brandon Cole, was, in reality, silently drowning under a crushing mountain of over $300,000 in debt, amassed from a series of reckless business ventures and a profound gambling addiction. Yet in my mother's carefully constructed narrative, he remained ambitious, driven, always on the cusp of a spectacular breakthrough. He was anything but my mother's intricate fantasies required a hero, a shining example of success, and Brandon, despite his glaring flaws, played the role badly but willingly. I learned to exist quietly, to accept my perceived insignificance in their dismissive eyes, to become adept at fading into the background of their self-congratulatory world. Then, one particularly dreary night, while meticulously cleaning the opulent 15th floor executive bathroom, I discovered a crumpled, slightly damp single-dollar bill tucked away behind the toilet. Most people in their comfortable lives would have discarded it without a second thought, seeing it as mere refuse. But when you subsist on minimum wage, when every penny counts, a dollar is never just a dollar. I carefully flattened it, dried it with a paper towel, and slipped it into my pocket, unknowingly carrying the seeds of my family's ultimate downfall in my hands. That humble dollar would, in time, become a Powerball ticket, and that seemingly insignificant ticket would transform into the unexpected, inescapable judgment none of them saw coming. That same night, after the serendipitous discovery of the crumpled dollar, I completed my shift as I always did. Quietly, with my head bowed, moving through the echoing halls of Parkview Tower like a phantom, gliding through the vibrant world of the living. At precisely 2 in the morning, the lobby security guard, a kind man named Marco, offered me the same gentle half-smile he bestowed upon me every night, a gesture of shared understanding in the quiet hours. I stepped out into the crisp, cold Manhattan air. The city lights flickered, casting distorted reflections on the rain-slicked pavement. The corner bodega, where I always purchased my morning coffee, was still open, a beacon of light in the pre-dawn gloom. Lexington Market Bodega, a place where the fluorescent lights were almost too bright, the coffee reassuringly cheap, and the conversations surprisingly genuine. Ben, the owner, was methodically wiping down the counter when I entered. "Long night, Laya?" he inquired, already printing a receipt for my usual order without my needing to speak. I merely shrugged, a small gesture. "Just a normal night." Ben's face broke into a knowing grin. "Then you definitely need something lucky," he teased, tapping the Powerball machine suggestively. Without a moment's hesitation, I handed him the slightly damp dollar. "Don't you dare forget us, the little people, when you win big," he joked. We both shared a brief, hollow laugh, the kind that fills a small corner of your chest for a fleeting moment before dissolving into the vastness of the city. 3 days later, in the cramped janitor's supply closet that served as my only break room, I nervously checked the Powerball numbers on my aging phone. Then I checked them again, and a third time. My hands began to tremble so violently I had to collapse onto an overturned bucket to prevent myself from falling completely. Every single number matched, every last one. My heart began to thunder, not with joyous excitement, but with a profound, consuming fear. Fear that someone would discover my secret, fear that I might somehow lose it, fear that even this incredible, life-altering miracle could be snatched away from me. For the remainder of that shift, I walked with the precious ticket carefully tucked inside a Ziploc bag, hidden deep within my work boot. Every careful step I took felt like both a desperate prayer and an immense, unimaginable risk. On the fourth day, I did something I had never done before. I called in sick. I drove, heart-pounding, to the New York State Lottery headquarters in Schenectady. The building was starker and colder than I had anticipated, all harsh fluorescent lights and monotonous beige walls. A kind woman named Patricia Green greeted me, her warmth a surprising balm that miraculously steadied my shaking hands. "Sweetheart," she said gently, her voice full of genuine concern, "before you sign a single thing, you absolutely need a lawyer." That singular piece of advice altered everything. Which is precisely how I found myself, just a day later, sinking into a plush leather chair in the elegant office of Isabel Hartman, a woman possessing a mind as sharp as a finely honed blade and an even sharper instinct for safeguarding the interests of individuals like me. Her office, by a cruel twist of fate, was located 2 floors above where Brightcore Systems had once proudly stood, another ironic jest from the universe. Isabel, ever efficient, slid a stack of complex paperwork across her gleaming desk, patiently explaining the intricacies of taxes, the advantages and disadvantages of lump-sum deductions, and the sophisticated strategies employed by the truly wealthy to preserve and grow their fortunes. And that was the moment I confided my carefully conceived plan to her. A plan that had quietly taken shape in the vulnerable spaces between my fear and my newfound clarity. "I want to establish a trust," I stated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "A charitable trust, and it must be irrevocable." Isabel raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in her sharp eyes. "How much are we talking about?" she inquired. "Everything," I replied, "except for the bare minimum I need to begin my life anew." Her brow furrowed slightly. "And how much is that, precisely?" $12 million, I told her. She blinked once slowly, processing the enormity of my statement. "Laya," she said, her voice laced with disbelief, "that means you're effectively giving away $100 million. "It's not giving away," I corrected softly, a newfound conviction in my tone. "It's redirecting, to women like me, women who have experienced public, painful failures and were never afforded a genuine second chance." She studied me intently for a long moment, a silent assessment passing between us. Then, a slow nod. "Then," she declared, a hint of admiration in her voice, "let's build something that will truly last." And that is precisely what we did. Within a mere 7 days, the Renew Horizons Foundation was formally established, its purpose clear and its mission vital. Within 10, the substantial funds were securely transferred, which brings us directly to the day when every carefully laid plan began to converge and align perfectly, the morning of Christmas Eve. I stood before my mirror, observing my reflection. I was wearing a burgundy sweater, its color muted and faded from countless washes, paired with polyester pants acquired from Goodwill, and shoes whose soles were unmistakably beginning to separate from the uppers. I presented the precise image of myself my family anticipated and, frankly, preferred. Someone small, visibly embarrassed, someone who would passively accept their judgments and never dare to fight back. I carefully slid the photocopied Powerball ticket into the inner pocket of my sweater. The genuine, validated ticket was already safe, processed, and locked away in a secure vault. Then I drove to the sprawling Greenwich estate, the magnificent house my mother, Vivian, practically worshipped as the undeniable proof of her social superiority and elevated status. Brandon's brand new, gleaming Merced sat smugly in the expansive driveway. I parked my old, unassuming Honda discreetly behind it and stepped out into the crisp winter air. Through the grand, tall windows, I could already perceive it. The inviting, warm glow, the meticulously curated joy. The perfectly polished, pristine version of a family that had, in truth, never truly embraced me as one of their own. As I ascended the front steps, my cousin Samantha Doyle, a self-proclaimed influencer, spotted me through the glass. Her phone was already raised, actively filming content for her ever-present followers, her bright expression immediately freezing into a mask of undisguised judgment as her gaze took in my thrift store attire. "Oh, Laya," she drawled, her voice dripping with an almost unbearable condescension, "is that what you're actually wearing?" If only she knew, if only any of them knew. The night they had meticulously planned to humiliate me was the very night they were about to walk directly into their own spectacular, irreversible downfall. The instant I stepped into the opulent foyer of the Greenwich estate, the sound of their collective laughter drifted towards me, feeling as meticulously rehearsed as a theatrical performance. Every sparkle of their expensive jewelry, every delicate clink of crystal, every exaggerated, practiced smile felt meticulously choreographed to remind me, with brutal clarity, exactly where they believed I belonged, far beneath them. Samantha's phone remained pointed squarely at me as she circled closer, capturing every visible wrinkle in my sweater for her eager followers. "Family Christmas at the Whitford estate," she chirped falsely, her voice artificially bright. "So incredibly blessed to be surrounded by successful people this year." Her camera then smoothly panned across the lavish room, pointedly skipping over me as if I were merely an unsightly smudge. The foyer itself gleamed with marble floors polished to an almost blinding mirror shine. The grand chandelier above cast a warm, inviting light across the designer coats hung neatly along the custom-built racks. My own coat, a threadbare wool garment salvaged from a thrift store, looked like a stark, incongruous smudge against such calculated perfection. And then I heard the voice, a voice I could never mistake, a voice that always managed to send a chill down my spine. "Laya." My mother, Laya Cole, stood imperiously at the very top of the grand staircase, adorned in a St. John's suit that undoubtedly cost more than I earned in an entire month as a janitor. Her eyes swept over me with a dismissive gaze, as if she were meticulously examining a stubborn stain she couldn't quite manage to scrub clean. "What?" she demanded, her tone sharp with disapproval. "Are you wearing? Are those my best clean clothes?" I replied simply, my voice unwavering, "They are my best clean clothes." The room instantly fell silent, the festive hum abruptly ceasing. Whispers rippled subtly across the gathered crowd, soft enough to be mistaken for normal conversation, yet sharp enough to visibly cut the air around me. My Aunt Helen Doyle, ever concerned with appearances, discreetly turned away, as though even a fleeting glance in my direction might somehow diminish her carefully cultivated social standing. Edward, her husband, pointedly checked his expensive watch with an air of intentional, exaggerated boredom. My cousin Samantha, ever the opportunist, angled her phone so her ever-present followers could catch a glimpse of my inappropriate outfit in the background. Comments began to flash rapidly across her screen, a deluge of laughing emojis, pity emojis, and one particularly bold line. "Is she the maid?" Vivian descended the stairs slowly, each precise click of her designer heels a small, deliberate judgment. "Well," she said finally, a tight, artificial smile gracing her lips, "we should just be grateful you decided to grace us with your presence at all." She then turned to the assembled room, her smile hardening into something cold and brittle, like glass. "Everyone," she announced, her voice carrying a false cheer, "Laya has finally honored us with her presence." A thick silence followed. Not a single person met my gaze, save for one, Margaret Whitford, my grandmother. She watched me intently from her wheelchair near the flickering fireplace, her expression utterly unreadable, yet her eyes possessed a piercing sharpness that made me momentarily wonder what hidden truths she might already be aware of. The elaborate dining room was meticulously set for 31 guests, yet there were only precisely 30 chairs arranged around the grand table. "Oh," Vivian said lightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, "I must have miscounted the settings. Well, Laya, dear, I'm quite certain you won't mind. You are, after all, accustomed to such simplicity." Every single place setting was an exquisite work of art. Sparkling Francis Whitford silver, shimmering Waterford crystal, linen napkins meticulously rolled like priceless museum pieces. My name card was conspicuously absent. Vivian gestured dismissively toward the French doors. "There's a small folding table out on the porch," she explained, her voice devoid of genuine concern. "It's enclosed enough, mostly. Someone will eventually bring your plate out." "Seriously?" I asked softly, a tremor in my voice, but she had already turned away, dismissing me. My brother Brandon, a whiskey glass clutched firmly in his hand, raised it with a triumphant smirk. "At least you're used to eating alone, right, Laya?" He nudged Samantha's husband, a smug expression on his face. "She takes her dinner breaks at 3 in the morning, usually in a janitor's closet. This is definitely a significant upgrade for her." Laughter, cold and derisive, spread across the table. Samantha, ever the documentarian of our family's cruelties, lifted her phone again. Holiday memories. She sang into her live stream, her voice sickly sweet. I consciously avoided looking at my grandmother, but I could acutely feel her unwavering gaze, following every cruel insult, every small act of deliberate malice, every painful reminder that in their meticulously constructed world, I was an outsider they preferred to keep firmly outside. Our caterer, looking visibly uncomfortable and sheepish, carried my dinner plate out to the porch. The flimsy folding table wobbled precariously under the weight. The relentless wind rattled the window panes, and delicate frost traced thin, white, intricate webs across the edges of the glass. I sat there, utterly alone, breathing visible fog into the cold, still air, listening to the interior world vibrate with its unearned warmth and excessive indulgence. 20 minutes into what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner, Vivian delicately clinked her champagne flute. Even from my isolated perch on the porch, I could hear the sharp, clear sound. "Before we continue this truly wonderful evening," she announced, standing imperiously at the head of the table like a queen presiding over her devoted court, "I wish to clarify something critically important, especially given some recent, rather impertinent questions regarding my intentions." She then turned, her gaze snapping towards me through the glass, her smile as cold and unforgiving as carved ice. "I have made a decision," she declared, her voice ringing with finality, "to update my will. Everything, my home, my extensive investments, my entire estate, will now go directly to Brandon. He possesses ambition. He demonstrates unwavering drive. He makes this family genuinely proud." Brandon, beaming with triumph, raised his glass in a celebratory gesture. "Thanks, Mom," he exclaimed, his voice thick with self-satisfaction. "I'll absolutely make you proud." "And as for Laya," Vivian's voice suddenly sharpened, hardening like flint, 5 years as a janitor has unequivocally proven precisely where her capabilities lie. I will absolutely not fund further failure." A wave of applause erupted, genuine and enthusiastic. Even the more distant cousins clapped heartily between bites of trifle. Through the frosted window, I watched my plate, now utterly cold and untouched. The struggling heater flickered once, then died completely. A fresh layer of ice crept higher along the corners of the glass panes. Inside that golden, glittering room, Vivian basked in the collective admiration, utterly convinced she had delivered a masterclass in maternal authority and decisive leadership. I smiled, a small, quiet, knowing smile, because the photocopied Powerball ticket lay folded neatly in my sweater pocket, patiently awaiting its predetermined moment. And when that moment arrived, it would ruthlessly expose every greedy hand in that room, every whispered insult, every casual cruelty they had so blithely justified under the guise of family. They craved a show. They were about to get one far grander than they could ever imagine. Inside the dining room, the resounding applause slowly faded into a low, contented hum of satisfied chatter. Glasses clinked softly, forks tapped delicately against porcelain, and whispers stretched into smug, self-congratulatory smirks. They had just collectively witnessed my very public disinheritance, and they clearly relished it. They savored the moment with the same perverse pleasure some people reserve for a decadent dessert. I lingered on the porch for a little while longer, allowing the biting cold to thoroughly penetrate my skin, letting it anchor me to the present moment, allowing the searing humiliation to crystallize into a focused resolve rather than overwhelming pain. Because, unlike them, I already possessed the full, complete knowledge of how this evening would ultimately conclude. I knew precisely what kind of tempest was about to violently crash through that glittering, oblivious room. When I finally rose, my joints stiff and aching from the prolonged exposure to the cold, the flimsy folding chair scraped against the concrete with an ugly, metallic shriek. A sound that, in its jarring discord, somehow perfectly encapsulated the gravity of the moment. I carried my untouched paper plate back inside, pushing through the French doors. The sudden blast of warm air hit me like a physical slap, a stark contrast to the numbing chill I had just endured. Before I could even make a move, she dropped to her knees with an astonishing speed I had never witnessed from her before, scrambling frantically across the floor as though her very life depended on it. She snatched the ticket with both hands, clutching it desperately, her expensive St. John's suit stretching dangerously at the seams. "Oh my God," she gasped, breathless with disbelief and avarice. "It's the winning ticket. It's really the winning ticket?" Brandon, propelled by a surge of pure greed, nearly knocked over a chair as he lunged towards her. "Mom," he exclaimed, his voice hoarse with excitement. "I saw these numbers on the news. This is it. This is the $120 million. Samantha was already screaming hysterically into her live stream. Guys, you are absolutely not going to believe this. We just found the Powerball ticket at our Christmas dinner." I simply stood there, utterly silent, a calm observer of the unfolding chaos. Vivian clutched the ticket fiercely to her chest, cradling it like a newborn child. "This is mine," she declared, her voice trembling with possessiveness. "It fell on my property. That means it legally belongs to me." I blinked slowly, deliberately. "You truly believe that's how it works?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "It absolutely is." She snapped back, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Abandoned property legally belongs to the homeowner, and you," she jabbed a finger accusingly at me, "were leaving. That constitutes abandonment." Edward Doyle, ever eager to parade his shallow legal knowledge, nodded gravely. "She's technically correct," he muttered, puffing out his chest. "Possession and property rights," but Samantha abruptly cut him off. Wait," she interjected, her camera still fixed on me. "Why did Laya even have it? Laya, did you actually buy a Powerball ticket with janitor money?" Brandon burst into a loud, mocking laugh. "She probably just found the dollar on the sidewalk." He guffawed, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "This is absolutely hilarious." I met Vivian's gaze, my expression unwavering. "I bought it," I stated clearly, "with $1 I found while cleaning a bathroom." Laughter, sharper and more vicious than before, exploded across the foyer. Vivian pressed the photocopied ticket to her heart, her face contorted in a bizarre mixture of disbelief and fervent hope. "God," she declared dramatically, her voice trembling with emotion, "is finally rewarding me for everything I have endured." Then, with visibly shaking hands, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the lottery commission right now," she announced. "Put it on speaker." Samantha shrieked with excitement. "The viewers need to hear this." Vivian dialed, her breath quivering with anticipation. A calm, automated voice answered, "For winning ticket verification, please press 1. Vivian, with a shaking finger, punched the number 1. Moments later, a familiar voice emanated from the phone speaker. "New York State Lottery Claims Department. This is Patricia Green speaking." Of course, it was her. Vivian's voice cracked with barely contained excitement. "Hello, I have the winning ticket, the $120 million Powerball." Patricia responded politely, her tone even. "Great, please read me the ticket number." Vivian meticulously read the numbers, slowly and carefully. There was the faint sound of typing on the other end of the line. "Ma'am," Patricia said, after a prolonged, agonizing pause that seemed to stretch into eternity, "this ticket was already claimed 3 weeks ago." Vivian froze, her face instantly draining of color. "What?" Her voice shrank to a terrified whisper. "It was claimed on December 7th at 2:47 p.m., Patricia continued, her voice devoid of emotion. Patricia paused, a deliberate, pregnant silence hanging in the air. Every single head in the room turned slowly, inexorably, towards me, even before she uttered the next words. "By Laya Cole." The silence that followed was a palpable, physical force, pressing down on everyone in the room. Samantha's phone slipped slightly in her trembling hand. Brandon's jaw hung open, a comical picture of stunned disbelief. Vivian looked at the photocopy again, now too utterly stunned to conceal the stark truth of the situation. That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm holding it right here." "Ma'am," Patricia replied, her tone firm yet empathetic, "what you are holding must be a photocopy. The original ticket is securely in our vault, as required by law." Vivian's face crumpled, a horrifying tangle of shock, confusion, and raw outrage. Is Miss Cole there? Patricia inquired, her voice cutting through the thick silence. I can confirm with her directly. I'm here, I said gently, my voice calm and steady. Congratulations again on your win, Miss Cole, Patricia said warmly. I hope the foundation paperwork went through smoothly. Vivian's head jerked up violently, her eyes wide with bewilderment. Foundation? What foundation? But the line had already gone dead. I allowed the silence to stretch, to linger, letting the full, unvarnished truth sink in. I let every face in that room mirror the catastrophic collapse they had so meticulously attempted to orchestrate for me. And then, slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag. Since we're sharing, I said softly, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned room, I have a few documents of my own. For a breathless moment, no one dared to inhale. The only sound in the entire foyer was the faint, rhythmic crackle of the fireplace. A soft, almost mocking reminder that the night had just violently shifted on its axis, and there was absolutely no turning back. Vivian still clung desperately to the worthless photocopy, her knuckles blanched white, her breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts, as if that flimsy piece of paper still held the key to her salvation. You tricked us, she whispered, her voice trembling with a nascent fury. You deliberately brought this here just to embarrass me. I met her gaze calmly, my eyes holding steady. No, Mother, I responded, my voice clear and unwavering. I brought it because you needed to show the world, definitively, exactly who you were. Samantha's live stream comments flashed across her screen at an astonishing, unreadable speed. OMG, this is insane. Mom caught in 4K? This family is done. Let Laya talk. Her viewers, a hungry mob, instinctively recognized a climax when they saw one. I didn't raise my voice, there was no need. This, I announced, unfolding the first document with deliberate, almost theatrical care, is the official prize claim receipt. State certified, notarized, precisely dated, and signed by 3 officials at the New York State Lottery headquarters. Edward Doyle, unable to contain himself, snatched the document before Vivian could even react. His eyes darted rapidly across the page, his face visibly losing color. This is real, he muttered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Every signature, every seal, it's legitimate. Vivian's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. Laya, why didn't you tell us? Why would you hide this from your own family? I allowed the silence to speak first, a heavy, accusatory weight in the air. Then I breathed out a single, loaded word. Family. It felt alien, foreign in this house, a concept utterly devoid of its true meaning here. I looked slowly around the room, truly looked, at the cousins who had openly mocked my humble clothes, at the relatives who had whispered maliciously behind polished wine glasses, at the people who had watched me eat alone on a freezing porch with no more concern than they'd extend to a stray, hungry cat. Then my eyes landed on Samantha's phone screen, where thousands of comments continued to pour in, a testament to the public spectacle unfolding. In that precise moment, I knew exactly what I needed to say. If you've ever had someone in your own family underestimate you, or attempt to seize what rightfully belongs to you, tell me in the comments below what your response would have been in this exact moment. I genuinely read every single story, and trust me, you are absolutely not alone. Vivian stared at me blankly, as if she no longer understood the language I was speaking. Instead of directly answering her, I slowly held up the second document. And this, I continued, my voice steady, is the Irrevocable Charitable Trust, the Renew Horizons Foundation. Helen, my aunt, leaned in conspiratorially. Irrevocable? She whispered, her eyes wide with dawning realization. Meaning she can't undo it? No, Edward muttered, his eyes scanning the fine print on the document, his voice a strained whisper. She donated $100 million. Gasps rippled uncontrollably across the foyer. Vivian recoiled as though physically struck. You gave away $100 million. She shrieked, her voice filled with a desperate, incredulous fury. To strangers. I kept what I needed, I stated simply, my voice unwavering. 12 million is more than enough. The foundation is specifically for women who have lost everything, women who genuinely need a second chance. Samantha swung her camera wildly towards me, her live stream audience surging past an astonishing 160,000 viewers. Brandon staggered a step forward, a cold sliver of panic slicing through his drunken haze. You could have helped me. he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. I needed money, you could have saved me. I looked at him steadily, my gaze unblinking. You don't require saving, Brandon, you desperately need accountability. His face twisted into a snarl. You selfish. I lifted the final document before he could complete his insult. And this, I said softly, my voice cutting through his anger, is the deed to Parkview Tower. The shock was immediate, profound. Everyone in the room froze, caught in the grip of an impossible, unbelievable truth. Samantha gasped, a sharp intake of breath. You bought the very building where you mop floors? A slow, knowing smile curved at the corner of my mouth. I don't mop floors there anymore. Vivian's face contorted with a sickening blend of disbelief and raw fury. You planned this. She spat, her voice laced with venom. All of this just to humiliate me? I tilted my head slightly. No, Mother, I corrected her, my voice calm. That particular part was entirely your own doing. And then, something subtle shifted in the room, then seismic. A soft scraping sound drew every gaze. Margaret Whitford, my grandmother, was slowly rising from her wheelchair. Deliberately, carefully, she stood taller than I had seen her in years. Vivian stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock. Mother, you can walk. Grandmother's voice was steady, sharp, cutting through the stunned silence. I've always been able to walk, Vivian. The chair merely helped me observe who people truly become when they mistakenly believe I am powerless. The room stiffened, the air thick with tension. She stepped closer, and every ounce of pretense in the room evaporated like mist. Tonight, she declared, her voice ringing with authority, I saw absolutely everything. Vivian went utterly pale. Mother, I can explain. You humiliated your own daughter, grandmother interjected, her voice unwavering. You made her eat alone in the bitter cold. You mocked her struggles. You shamelessly coveted money that was not yours. You even tried to steal her miracle the very moment you believed it might belong to you. Vivian shook her head desperately, tears welling in her eyes. Please, Mother. Grandmother turned to her attorney, Isabel Hartman, who had quietly stepped forward, a silent, formidable presence. Isabel, she commanded, her voice firm, initiate the changes. Vivian's breath hitched, a strangled sound. What changes? The ones removing you from my estate, grandmother stated calmly, her eyes fixed on Vivian. All $6 million will now be directed to the Renew Horizons Foundation. Gasps exploded across the dining room. Brandon lurched forward, panic now fully eclipsing his drunken haze. What about my trust fund? You can't take that away from me. Grandmother raised an elegant eyebrow. I already have. His phone began to ring, then again, then a third time. His creditors, it seemed, had been watching the live stream as well. Vivian's voice cracked, thin and fragile, breaking completely. You can't do this, we're your family. Grandmother looked at me, her eyes soft, warm, and absolutely certain. No, she said gently, her gaze unwavering, she is. And in that profound moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A deep sense of belonging, an unshakable strength, a sweet, overwhelming vindication. The memory of the cold porch, the mocking laughter, the casual cruelty, it all melted away, because for the very first time, I wasn't the one left outside. The room itself seemed to tremble, not physically, but with the quiet, stunned way a grand chandelier might sway almost imperceptibly after someone slams a heavy door. The entire energy of the space shifted, irrevocably. Faces that had once glowed with smug superiority now flickered with a raw mixture of confusion, fear, and something dangerously close to profound shame. Vivian still desperately clung to the crumpled photocopy, as if that flimsy piece of paper were her last remaining lifeline. Brandon stared blankly at his vibrating phone, too terrified to answer the relentless calls. Samantha's live stream comments flooded her screen faster than she could possibly read them, thousands of people eagerly watching every unraveling second of their downfall. Mother, you simply cannot do this, Vivian whispered hoarsely to my grandmother, her voice thick with desperation. You can't just take everything away from me, from us. But grandmother didn't falter, her gaze unwavering. I'm not taking anything, she replied, her voice firm. I am simply ensuring it goes to where it will actually achieve good. I didn't move. I didn't utter a single word. I didn't need to. The truth had already carved its path clean through the room, and everyone present was still struggling to comprehend which way gravity had suddenly, violently shifted. Edward Doyle ran a trembling hand. "This will fundamentally change everything," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "The estate, the trust, this is all legally binding." His voice cracked painfully on the last word. Vivian's eyes darted desperately towards me, a flicker of frantic hope, then resentment. "You planned this," she hissed, her voice filled with accusation. "You waited until Christmas Eve, to ambush me." I met her gaze steadily, my resolve unbroken. "You ambushed yourself." Brandon's pent-up panic finally exploded. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice high-pitched and frantic. "This isn't fair, I need that trust. I owe people, they are not patient." As if on cue, his phone lit up again. Another call, then another. The dread in his eyes visibly deepened. "Perhaps," I said calmly, my voice even, "you could consider finding a job. I hear Parkview Tower is hiring night shift janitors." A few gasps rippled across the room, the irony not lost on them. Vivian's face contorted with a fresh wave of fury. "You think this is funny? You truly think we deserve this?" I studied her, this woman who had so cruelly banished me to the freezing porch, this woman who had announced my disinheritance as if it were a celebratory toast, this woman who had lunged greedily for a lottery ticket she never earned. "Deserve?" I echoed softly, letting the word hang in the air. "No, Mother, I think this is justice." Before she could respond, Samantha lifted her phone again and whispered into her live stream, seemingly unable or unwilling to stop. "You guys, this is literally the craziest Christmas ever. Her voice was abruptly cut off when Grandmother turned to her sharply. "Samantha," she commanded, her voice chillingly calm, "put the phone down." This time, Samantha obeyed instantly, her defiance completely gone. Even her captivated audience sensed the profound shift in authority. Comments continued to flood in, pleading for more, demanding updates, begging for another angle, but for the very first time that night, Samantha was incapable of performing. Grandmother stepped forward, her cane tapping rhythmically against the cold marble floor, a steady, deliberate sound. "I gave this family everything," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces in the room. "My time, my entire life savings, my home. And I watched every single one of you waste it all on vanity and unwarranted entitlement." Her voice hardened, becoming steel. "But Laya," she continued, her eyes softening as they met mine, "Laya rebuilt herself from the ground up. She worked tirelessly, she endured unimaginable hardship, and she steadfastly maintained her dignity when every single one of you tried relentlessly to strip it from her." I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. It had been a painfully long time since someone had truly spoken up for me, defended me with such unwavering conviction. Vivian stumbled forward, frantic and desperate. "Mother, please, just think about this. You don't understand how hard things have truly been for me." Grandmother's eyes sharpened, cutting through Vivian's self-pity. "And you," she countered, her voice unwavering, "don't understand how hard you've made things for everyone else." Vivian froze, her self-pity turning to fear. "This house," Grandmother continued, her voice resonating with authority, "was never truly yours. I merely allowed you to reside here. I permitted you to host these extravagant gatherings. But after tonight, you will have precisely 60 days to vacate the premises." Brandon's mouth fell open, a silent gasp of horror. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That," Grandmother stated with an almost regal indifference, "is no longer my concern." The silence in the room thickened once more, heavy, smothering, impossible to escape. Helen Doyle, ever the opportunist, discreetly tugged at Edward's sleeve. "We should go," she whispered urgently. He nodded quickly, his eyes wide with fear. One by one, the assorted relatives began to slip stealthily towards the foyer, grabbing their coats, carefully avoiding eye contact, fleeing the impending fallout they no longer wished to be associated with. Within minutes, half the extended family had abandoned the room, scattering like rats deserting a rapidly sinking yacht. Samantha, however, remained frozen in place, her phone lowered but still automatically recording. Her live stream had not stopped. Over 200,000 viewers were now intently watching, commenting relentlessly. "Grandma is a queen. Mom ruined everything. This is better than a movie. Laya, stand tall." I exhaled slowly, a deep, cleansing breath. Vivian sank to her knees, staring blankly at the worthless photocopy. Her meticulously applied makeup streaked in dark, despairing lines down her tear-stained cheeks. "You don't understand," she sobbed, her voice broken. "I can't lose everything I've built my entire life on." "On what?" Grandmother asked softly, her voice piercing through Vivian's self-pity. "On other people's generosity. On other people's achievements. On your own daughter's humiliation." Vivian covered her face with trembling hands. "Laya," she pleaded through her fingers, her voice raw with desperation. "Please, please help us. Help me." It took me a moment to respond, not because I was unsure, but because I needed to allow the full weight of the truth to settle between us, the truth she had so vehemently avoided her entire life. "I tried to help," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "For years, you just never wanted the kind of help that required true humility." Vivian looked up at me, her eyes swollen and red. "But you have millions," she begged, her voice a desperate plea. "You could save us." "I don't save people who tried to steal from me," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I don't save people who pushed me out into the freezing cold and then audaciously called it love." Her breath hitched, a pained gasp. "And I don't save people," I continued softly, my gaze steady, "who only remember I exist when they are in desperate need of something." Brandon slammed his fist against the table, a pathetic display of anger. "This is all your fault." "No," I said calmly, meeting his enraged gaze, "it's yours." And for the very first time in his life, he had no clever comeback. The empire they believed they owned, built on a foundation of deceit and entitlement, was crumbling rapidly, mercilessly, irrevocably. And all I had done was simply allow the unvarnished truth to speak for itself. The house had never felt so utterly silent. Not even the soft, gentle hum of the chandelier seemed willing to fill the oppressive void. The Whitford estate, usually loud with its ceaseless self-congratulation, suddenly felt like a deserted museum after hours, cold, echoing, completely stripped of its carefully constructed illusions. Brandon paced agitatedly behind the couch, trapped and desperate like a cornered animal. Vivian still knelt on the floor, her fingers tightly curled around the worthless photocopy, as if she could somehow squeeze value back into its fibers. Samantha hovered awkwardly between her rapidly disintegrating family and her still-running phone, torn between offering assistance or continuing to film the unfolding drama. But her ingrained instinct for attention ultimately won. The live stream remained on, and then something profound shifted, not in the room itself, but within me. For the first time in 38 years of my existence, I no longer felt like an outsider, desperately trying to carve out a place within my own family. I felt, with absolute certainty, like the only person in the entire room standing firmly on solid, unyielding ground. I inhaled deeply, the newfound quiet settling around me like impenetrable armor. "I need everyone's attention," I said calmly, my voice resonating with an unexpected authority. Brandon instantly stopped his pacing. Vivian slowly lifted her blotched, tear-streaked face. Samantha raised her phone again, instinctively angling for the best shot, her gaze wide with a morbid fascination. "Good," I thought to myself. "Let them watch. Let the whole world watch." I lifted the folder I held in my hand. "I have more documents," I announced, my voice clear and unwavering. "Ones you haven't seen yet." Brandon groaned dramatically. "Are you kidding me? More?" "If you wish to leave, please go ahead," I said softly, a hint of steel in my tone. "Your debt collectors can certainly take it from here." His face instantly blanched, and he remained rooted to the spot. I removed the first document, an embossed certificate bearing the elegant silver seal of Parkview Tower. "You already know I purchased the building," I continued, my gaze sweeping over their stunned faces. "But what you don't yet know is what happens on January 2nd. Vivian blinked slowly, confusion clouding her eyes. "What? What happens then?" "The Renew Horizons Foundation," I stated, my voice ringing with purpose, "will officially take over Suite 21105. The corner suite. The very suite where my life once dramatically fell apart. The suite where my new life will profoundly begin." Brandon scoffed, a sneer on his lips. "You're opening your charity in the same pathetic office where your company crashed. That's utterly pathetic." "It's poetic," I corrected him, my smile widening. Grandmother lifted her chin, a flicker of profound pride shining in her eyes. I continued. "And the building's contract with Clean Works, the janitorial service, expires next month." Brandon frowned, genuinely bewildered. Why are you telling us this? Because, I said, looking directly at him, I will be giving priority interviews to anyone who genuinely desires honest work. No shortcuts, no bailouts, just honest effort. It took him a full 5 seconds to fully comprehend the implication. You're offering me a janitor job? If you apply, I said, my voice calm, and if you successfully pass the background check. Samantha covered her mouth, barely suppressing a gasp, her eyes wide with shock. Her viewers exploded in the chat. Let him mop. Justice served. This is pure cinema. Brandon, apply right now. Vivian's voice cracked, thick with desperation. Laya, stop, please, he's your brother. He's an adult, I countered, my voice firm, who has deliberately run from responsibility his entire life. Brandon lunged towards me, his face contorted with unadulterated fury. You think you're better than us now just because you won the lottery. I met his rage with an unshakable calm. No, I said, my gaze unwavering. I think I always tried to do the right thing. You just never bothered to notice. The room pulsed with a tension so thick it felt like a second atmosphere, suffocating them all. Vivian shuffled closer on her knees, her eyes pleading. Laya, she begged, her voice raw, please, we can fix this. We can still be a family. Your money could. My money, I repeated slowly, deliberately, was never the problem. I crouched slightly, bringing myself to her eye level. You made me eat outside in freezing weather because you decided I wasn't worthy of your table. You told your entire family I was incapable, unambitious, a complete disgrace. You celebrated cutting me out of your will, and then you tried to steal what you believed was my last chance at survival. Vivian trembled violently, her face a mask of distress. You don't understand. No, I said, standing again, letting the immense weight of the moment settle fully. You don't. I rose to my full height, my posture radiating an unshakable confidence. Family doesn't treat people like that. You didn't lose me tonight. You lost me years ago. Tonight, you simply confirmed it. Her lips parted, but no words came, choked by her own undoing. I lifted the next document, one with crisp, clean lines and a subtle gold edge. And there is one final thing you all need to see. Samantha edged closer with her phone, her audience now soaring past 240,000. This, I continued, my voice steady and clear, is the independent valuation of the Whitford estate. Vivian visibly jerked, her eyes wide. Why would you? What does that have to do with anything? Because grandmother has transferred all remaining authority over this estate to a trust overseen by Isabel Hartman, I said, my words a quiet hammer blow. And the trust has already allocated the full $6 million to the Renew Horizons Foundation. Vivian collapsed back onto her heels, stunned into a silence so profound it felt as if the entire world had abruptly stopped turning. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. No, mother, no, you can't do this, you owe me. Grandmother's voice cut like a finely honed blade, sharp and decisive. I owe you nothing. Vivian sobbed uncontrollably into her trembling hands. And I added softly, my voice devoid of emotion, the house is not yours, it never was. You have 60 days to move out. Brandon's horror struck next, a visceral, sickening realization. This is insane. Where are we supposed to go? What about my trust fund? Grandmother turned her unwavering gaze to him. Dissolved, she stated flatly. You demonstrated tonight precisely why you were never ready for that responsibility. Brandon's phone rang again, and again. The creditors, it seemed, had indeed been watching the live stream. Samantha's grandmother gently touched my arm. Enough for tonight, Laya, she said softly, her voice filled with tenderness. Let's go. And as we turned away, preparing to leave behind the house that had never truly been a home, Samantha's live stream captured one last, damning image. Vivian screaming into the empty air, clutching a worthless photocopy to her chest, while Brandon sank to the floor beside her. His phone buzzing incessantly, creditors closing in. The fragile empire they had so desperately clung to was crumbling, irrevocably, around them. As grandmother and I stepped towards the foyer, the last threads of the night seemed to pull taut behind us, as if the house itself refused to let the moment fully end. The chandelier above flickered erratically, casting fractured, distorted light across faces twisted by disbelief and dawning horror. Even the festive Christmas garlands felt utterly out of place now, like forgotten props left over from a play whose script had just been dramatically rewritten in real time. I reached for my shabby coat, the same one they had openly mocked for years. And then I paused. "Actually," I said quietly, my voice resonating with newfound authority. "Keep it." Head snapped towards me, every eye wide with surprise. Brandon blinked, utterly bewildered. "What?" Vivian's swollen eyes slowly lifted, still shining with a desperate mixture of tears and rapidly fading hope. I held the coat out to them, a tangible symbol of their past perceptions. "A reminder," I said softly, my voice clear, "of who you all mistakenly believed I was." Gasps rippled across the room, a collective intake of breath. Then, with calm, deliberate precision, I slipped out of my worn, thrift store sweater. Underneath it, I revealed a simple, elegant black cashmere dress. Its lines were clean, sophisticated, understated, precisely the kind of exquisite outfit no one had bothered to notice beneath the carefully chosen costume they had expected me to wear. Samantha's eyes widened to saucers. Her live stream viewers exploded in the chat. Oh, she came prepared. The glow up, the swerve, they didn't even see her coming. I reached into my purse, a sleek black Chanel 22 bag, the kind a brand-conscious Samantha could price within seconds. Another collective gasp. You came here dressed like this?" Samantha stammered, her voice incredulous. "Why would you hide it?" I looked slowly around the room, taking in the gleaming marble, the sparkling crystal, the fragile, rapidly disintegrating self-importance clinging to every single relative like an expensive, cloying perfume. "Because," I said, my voice resonating with quiet power, "you only ever saw what you wanted to see. They saw a failure, so they treated me like one. They saw a servant, so they banished me to the cold. They saw a weakness, so they pounced on it with relish. They never once bothered to look deeper than the surface." The irony of it all would have been hysterically funny if it hadn't been so utterly tragic. I reached into my elegant bag and pulled out a key fob. Sleek, metallic, utterly unmistakable. A lucid Air Grand touring fob. Brandon blinked, confused. "Where's your Honda?" "Oh," I said lightly, a faint, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Around the corner. My driver is keeping the Lucid warm." Another tidal wave of shock washed over the room. Vivian stared at me as if she were seeing me for the very first time in her entire life. You had all this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And you didn't tell us?" I met her eyes, my gaze steady. Why would I tell people who were actively rooting for me to remain small and insignificant? Her lips parted, trembling, on the verge of tears. You let us think you were struggling." "I was struggling," I replied, my voice gentle but firm, "just not in the way you ever imagined." The room pulsed again, a chaotic mixture of resentment, shame, fury, and utter disbelief, all mixing into something dangerously volatile. Before anyone could speak, the double doors swung open, and Isabel Hartman re-entered, carrying a final, thin folder. Her heels echoed sharply across the marble floor like definitive punctuation marks. "Everything is processed," she announced to grandmother, her voice calm and professional. "The estate changes are filed." Vivian lurched to her feet, a fresh wave of panic engulfing her. "No, Isabel, wait, you can't do this. I am her daughter." Isabel raised a hand, calm but firm. "You tried to claim a lottery ticket that wasn't yours, on camera, in front of nearly 200,000 live viewers." Samantha swallowed hard, a choked sound. "My live stream is still running," she whispered faintly. Then they all heard it. Isabel said, "Your mother signed over full control. The trust has been executed." Vivian staggered, reeling from the blow. "You're destroying my life." Isabel looked at her with a professionalism sharpened by years of dealing with entitled clients. "No, Vivian," she stated clearly, "you destroyed it yourself." Grandmother stepped forward. "Come, Laya," but Vivian wasn't finished. She lunged not at me but at the folder in Isabel's hands. "Give it back," she cried, her voice desperate. "You can't do this, I am her daughter." Isabel stepped back, calm but firm, protecting the documents. "And Laya," she said, her voice resonating with powerful truth, "is her legacy." Vivian froze. The words struck deeper than I expected, and I had to take a quiet breath to steady myself. I wasn't accustomed to being spoken about with that kind of weight, that kind of profound significance. Vivian collapsed onto the opulent couch, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. Leia, please, please don't walk away, she begged, her voice raw with despair. You're all I have left. For a fleeting moment, the little girl inside me, the one who used to desperately yearn for her mother's approval, stirred. But then I remembered the porch, the biting cold, the mocking laughter, the casual cruelty she had so easily called tough love. I'm not walking away, I said, my voice calm and resolute. I'm letting go. Vivian's sobs cracked open again, a broken sound. Brandon stared at me, his face a mask of despair, as if watching his final lifeline disappear into the churning abyss. You can't leave us like this. I looked at him, truly looked. You never once asked me to stay, I said softly, my voice tinged with a quiet sadness. Not once, you only ever asked when you needed something. His shoulders slumped, defeated. We stood there in the desolate ruins of their own making, and all I could feel was an overwhelming, liberating clarity. I slipped the Chanel bag over my shoulder. Grandmother took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. As we walked towards the door, Samantha whispered, almost to herself, her voice barely audible, This is going to break the internet. I paused, turning back one last time. Vivian, her face blotched and broken, still clutched the worthless photocopy to her chest, as if it might still magically save her. Brandon had sunk further into the couch, his phone buzzing nonstop, creditors closing in, relentless. The remaining relatives stood frozen, wide-eyed, trapped between the crushing truth and the fragile facade they could no longer possibly maintain. A lifetime of their judgment condensed into one unforgettable, indelible image. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I uttered the only words that felt truly authentic, truly deserved. Merry Christmas. The foyer itself seemed to exhale with me as grandmother, and I stepped outside. Snow drifted softly down from the inky black sky, clean and pure, a gentle whisper of winter brushing against my cheeks. The Lucid's headlights glowed warmly, a beacon in the quiet night, and James Porter, my driver, opened the back door with a respectful nod. How did it go, Miss Cole? He inquired, his voice low. I glanced back at the house, the brittle empire now visibly cracking beneath the immense weight of its own undoing. I smiled, calm and utterly unshaken, exactly as expected, and as we smoothly pulled away from the estate, the very last thing I saw through the frosted window was Vivian, running barefoot across the snow-dusted lawn, screaming hysterically into the silent night, still clinging desperately to that worthless photocopy, still futilely begging the universe to somehow restore a life she had never genuinely earned. In the days that followed, the world moved with a speed and ferocity that even I had not fully anticipated. By Christmas morning, Samantha's live stream had been meticulously clipped, widely shared, incessantly reposted, audaciously auto-tuned, thoroughly dissected, and broadcast across every conceivable digital platform. Lottery exposed on Christmas Eve trended globally. People didn't merely watch the downfall, they utterly devoured it, reveling in every dramatic second. News anchors gravely discussed the photocopy incident. Viral content creators meticulously reenacted Vivian's desperate dive for the ticket. Even late-night hosts cracked jokes about the woman who brazenly attempted to steal a lottery miracle. By New Year's, the clip had already surpassed an astonishing 50 million views. Vivian, ever defiant, desperately attempted to fight the overwhelming wave of public condemnation. Initially, she released a shaky, tearful video, incoherently claiming she was intentionally set up, emotionally abused, and even insidiously suggested I had manipulated my elderly grandmother. But Samantha's unfiltered, hours-long original live stream was already circulating widely, complete with precise timestamps that contradicted every single one of Vivian's fabricated claims. Public sympathy evaporated instantly. Her exclusive country club quietly, efficiently removed her from every mailing list. Her once numerous friends stopped answering her calls. By February, the Grand Whitford estate was officially listed for sale, every photograph of its once gleaming marble halls echoing with the ghost of the unchecked privilege that had once resided there. Brandon fared no better. When his creditors finally realized that his trust fund had indeed dissolved, they descended upon him with predatory speed and merciless efficiency. The threats intensified, and the bone-chilling fear he had once so cruelly mocked me for knowing now settled deep into his own bones. He fled the state for a while. Rumors circulated that he was in New Jersey, Others claimed Florida, but running, as I knew too well, never truly solved anything. Eventually, he resurfaced, doing part-time janitorial shifts at a dreary rest stop off the highway, a poetic symmetry I neither celebrated nor mourned. Samantha's once thriving influencer career utterly collapsed. Major brands instantly dropped her lucrative contracts. Her followers, once insatiably hungry for curated luxury and manufactured drama, remained only to morbidly witness the full extent of the fallout. She feebly attempted to pivot to redemption content, crying theatrically into her camera about profound lessons learned. But the internet, as she painfully discovered, is not kind to sudden, manufactured humility. Meanwhile, the Renew Horizons Foundation soared to unprecedented heights. The compelling story of a former janitor giving away $100 million to empower women to rebuild their lives captured the rapt attention of news outlets, prominent philanthropists, and visionary entrepreneurs nationwide. Applications poured in from women who had once been successful founders, ambitious dreamers, relentless strivers, women who had stumbled and been cruelly discarded in the same way I once had. By spring, we had proudly awarded grants to 50 deserving women. By summer, that number had grown to over 100. One remarkable recipient, a talented chef who had tragically lost her beloved restaurant during the pandemic, utilized her grant to establish a vibrant community culinary school specifically for women starting over. Another revived a sustainable fashion line that had been prematurely dismissed as naive by cynical investors, only to see it picked up by a major national retailer months later. Every single success, every triumph of these incredible women, felt like a stone meticulously placed back into the solid foundation of my own renewed sense of purpose. In Suite 21105, the very office where my life had once dramatically collapsed, was transformed into a bustling, vibrant space brimming with boundless possibility. Clean, warm, alive again, it hummed with new dreams. When I proudly hired some of my former janitor coworkers as building administrators, they wept openly. "You remembered us, Laya," Marcus said on his first day, tears in his eyes. "I was one of you," I told him gently, "and you were always so much more than the world chose to see." Grandmother attended every monthly board meeting, sharp and astute as ever. She willingly moved into a comfortable senior residence by choice, her spirit vibrant. "I simply prefer to be surrounded by people who genuinely appreciate life," she declared. We shared Sunday lunches together, simple meals that tasted infinitely richer and more fulfilling than every forced, hollow holiday banquet we had once endured. And then, almost precisely a year after that fateful Christmas Eve, someone filmed Vivian at a luxury goods store in Manhattan. Except she wasn't shopping. She was working as the cashier. A customer, recognizing her from the viral livestream, inquired, "Aren't you the woman who made your own daughter eat outside on Christmas?" Her face visibly crumbled. She walked off the floor and never returned. The clip went explosively viral before sunset. People called it Karma's Encore. I didn't comment, I didn't need to. I had long since learned that revenge is often loud and boastful, but true justice is quiet,